All right, let's dive right into this explainer, where we're going to distill the core philosophies of the 22 Immutable Laws of Branding by Al and Laura Rees. We're going to look at exactly how legendary brands manage to capture our minds. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with a literal blizzard of information about digital marketing tactics and all these quick growth hacks, it is incredibly easy to forget that the real foundational work on a brand's identity has to happen before any campaign even launches. So today, we're going all the way back to the absolute bedrock of branding to see what strategies have truly stood the test of time.
Here's our roadmap for navigating the consumer's brain today. We'll be hitting 1. The battle for the mind, 2. The hammer and the nail, 3. The trap of expansion, 4. The rules of naming, and 5. The Amazon exception.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the battle for the mind, focusing on the law of singularity.
Okay, so the very foundation of brand survival comes down to planting a single, incredibly focused flag right in the mind of your prospect. To show you how this works in practice, I actually want you to play along for a second. Think about how you categorize items in your own head. When I say the words expensive watch, what is the absolute first brand that pops into your brain? I'm guessing a lot of you immediately thought of Rolex, right? And this brilliantly illustrates what the Reeses call the law of the word. Rolex doesn't just make watches. They literally own the concept of expensive watch in the consumer's mind. Now, sure, quality is important, but does a Rolex actually keep better time than a much cheaper digital watch? Well, no, not necessarily, but they don't have to, because Rolex owns that specific perception of prestige and quality in your brain. And it doesn't just stop at luxury goods. Let's test your brain on something you probably do every day. If you want a really premium, expensive cup of coffee, what brand has successfully colonized that specific corner of your mind? Yep, it's Starbucks. The law of singularity dictates that Starbucks owns that specific premium coffee real estate in your brain. It just goes to show that the absolute most powerful brands out there stand for just one strong idea. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They are simply the premium accessible coffee experience. Period. Now, this mental real estate totally applies to the digital world too. Think about it. When you need to look something up online right now, where do you immediately go? Google. They successfully claimed the actual category name for search, cementing their brand identity so flawlessly that we literally use it as a verb. Once a brand owns a word like that, it's virtually impossible for a competitor to swoop in and steal it away. Let's try one more. Consider a beverage that practically invented its own space. You're dragging, you need a fast, intense jolt of energy from a can. What's the ultimate choice? Red Bull. What's wild here is how Red Bull's total laser-like specialization makes them completely synonymous with the term energy drink. They narrowed their focus so much that they essentially created a brand new category, and as a result, they just completely dominate it. Moving right along to Section 2, the hammer and the nail, where we pit visuals against verbals. So, knowing the word you want to own is really only half the battle. You actually have to drive that word deep into the consumer's consciousness. The foundational book Positioning, written by Al Rees and Jack Trout, taught us for years that securing your place in the market starts with the right words. And for a long time, the marketing world operated on this assumption that if you just had the perfect verbal message, you could win the battle for the mind. But, as Laura Rees noted in her later work, just relying on words, it's not enough anymore. Not even close. We live in a hyper-competitive, visually driven world. Sure, our marketing plans are made of words, but consumers don't process the world just through text. It really all comes down to cognitive anatomy. Visuals utterly dominate words because they speak instantly to the emotional right hemisphere of your brain. The left brain is super analytical, it processes your verbal positioning logically, but the right brain, that's where your emotions live, and it decodes visuals almost instantaneously. Laura Rees has this brilliant metaphor for this. She explains that you need a visual hammer. Think of Coke's iconic contour bottle or the Marlboro Cowboy to effectively drive your verbal nail into the consumer's mind. The word is the nail, but the visual is the hammer that does the actual heavy lifting to lodge that idea into the right brain. Without a really strong visual hammer, your verbal nail just bends. It completely falls flat against the consumer's mental defenses. Which brings us to Section 3, the trap of expansion, or contraction versus dilution. All right, so now that we know how to build a brand in the mind using a single word and a visual hammer, we have to look at how companies accidentally blow it all up. And honestly, it's an incredibly easy trap to fall into. It's called the law of expansion, which says the easiest way to destroy a brand is to just put its name on everything. You can see this stark contrast perfectly when Cadillac disastrously weakened their luxury prestige by slapping their name on the cheap Cimarron. Just a total unforced error. Whereas Wrigley, on the flip side, wisely leaned into the law of contraction. They created entirely separate sibling brands like Juicy Fruit and Big Red for their different markets. Narrowing your focus makes you a specialist, and in the consumer's mind, specialists always have higher quality than generalists.
Section 4. The rules of naming. Proper versus generic. This naturally brings us to internet branding. Listen, in the long run, a brand is nothing more than a name, and picking the right one is absolutely make or break. Back when the web was brand new, companies completely missed the mark by grabbing generic common nouns. They totally failed to realize that you cannot build a unique identity around a generic category word. You absolutely need a distinctive, proper noun. Generic names like Pets.com and Mortgage.com failed spectacularly because they just describe a category. Today, they literally just redirect to PetSmart and Citibank. You can't own a generic word in someone's mind. You need a proper noun like Amazon or Google to actually forge a lasting, unique identity.
And finally, Section 5, the Amazon exception, where we look at breaking the rules. Look, no rulebook is without its brilliant anomalies, and we have to address the massive elephant in the e-commerce room here. If the law of contraction says you should only do one thing, how on earth is Amazon so wildly successful selling literally everything? Well, this quote from Jeff Bezos really hits the nail on the head. He says, "Reputation is perception." Amazon seemingly bypassed the law of expansion because they didn't build their brand on a specific product. They built it on a specific, incredibly reliable experience.
Amazon gets to be the exception because their pure online nature and that exceptional user experience created a massive halo effect. Because they started by offering a totally seamless buying experience for literally any book you could name, that trust naturally spilled over into electronics and home goods and everything else. But here's the catch. They actually still follow the other core rules. They keep their identity remarkably stable over decades, which is the law of consistency. They welcome category competition to help build the overall e-commerce space, embracing the law of fellowship. And they are constantly adapting and innovating to avoid the ultimate law of mortality, proving that absolutely no brand lives forever without evolution.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a hard look at your own business. Are you a sharp, singular, visual hammer? Or are you just another dull, generic brand name fading into the background noise? Winning the battle for the mind requires serious discipline, deep focus, and the courage to stand for one specific thing. So, what is your one word? Keep that question front and center as you navigate your own branding journey.